Hello, Richard. Thank you very much for joining me. Would you like to tell the viewers who you are and what you do?
Sure, good, Trent. Well, my pleasure to be joining you. It's Richard Tubb, and I work with the owners of IT businesses. I typically help them to concentrate on what's important, to free up their time, and essentially to make more money. The reason I do that is I used to run an IT business myself based in Birmingham, and I sold that business about 8 years ago now. So over the time running the IT business, I made a lot of mistakes, and so I help other IT business owners to avoid all of those mistakes that I made.
Brilliant. And I know you've got a successful podcast. What was your reason for starting that podcast?
Sure. So the reason for me starting the podcast was simply that I've had the privilege of sitting down and speaking with some of the most successful, intelligent people in the IT industry. They've given freely of their time and expertise to me. And there was a dawning realization that, I've had so many of these people give so freely of their time, really good conversations. And there was this dawning realization that was like, wow, that was fantastic. That was real gold. I wish I'd recorded that to share it with someone, to share it with other people. So that's where the podcast was born out of. So now, before I sit down with these really smart, intelligent, successful people, I say to them, hey, would you mind if we recorded this for a podcast? And of course, they say, no, go for it. And so I share that as the podcast. And one of the highest pieces of compliments, or highest compliments that I've ever had from people is that they feel as though they're eavesdropping on a conversation between two friends. So I take that compliment very highly.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So it's obvious that you're giving a lot of value to people. Who are your listeners? Is there a typical listener for Tublog?
Sure. So typical listeners would be the owners of IT businesses, specifically what are known as managed service providers, MSPs. I used to run an MSP, and for anybody who's not familiar with the term, it means IT companies that provide outsourced IT support to small businesses for a flat monthly fee. So that's my area of expertise, and that tends to be the niche within the IT industry who listen to my podcast. With that said, I've been pleasantly surprised over the years that we've built up this audience of non-IT, non-geeky listeners as well. And the reason I'm told that people from outside the IT industry listen in is that they're big on personal development, and they want to listen to conversations between me and very smart, successful people to pick up the habits, techniques, routines that these highly intelligent, highly successful people share on the podcast as well. So predominantly IT people listen to the podcast, but we've also got a loyal following of non-IT people.
That's really great. So the IT industry is quite niche. There's a specific skill set that you have to work in that industry. And you said yourself that it can be considered a boring industry. What would you say to people who consider their boring industry to be a barrier if they wanted to do a podcast of their own?
Yeah, so I know we're specifically talking about podcasts, but if I may, I'll answer that by just talking about my experience going back sort of 15 years plus when I started blogging. And the biggest barrier for me to start blogging was, really, who wants to read about me talking about IT stuff and business and, my journey and stuff. And I overcame that and started blogging anyway. And wow, yeah, there was loads of people. So on a typical month, there's thousands of people, read my blog posts, and that transitioned into the podcast. So I would say to anybody who's thinking, well, I've got nothing to write about, I've got nothing to talk about, why would I start a blog, do a podcast or anything like that? The reality is that people always want to have a peek behind the curtain of other people's experiences, other people's journey. So whatever your podcast looks like, whether it's like mine, where I'm interviewing, successful people in the IT industry, or whether it's just you talking and sharing your own journey, don't underestimate the fact that there's going to be other people, not only within your niche and not only within your industry, but from outside as well, who are interested in your journey, who are interested in your viewpoint, who are interested in your perspective, your experiences. So whatever your industry is, I think that the IT industry can be quite boring, can be quite geeky. But the reality is there's people not only in the IT industry, but further afield who want to see that journey as well. So don't underestimate your story and the impact it can have on other people.
Well, thank you. That was a brilliant answer. So, does your podcast help you stand out in your marketplace from maybe some of your competitors?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I'll share two things with you about this. First one's a secret, so it's just between you and I, Gudrun.
Okay, I'll not tell
One
you.
of the one of the reasons that I do the podcast, I've said earlier, I get to speak to some of the most successful, intelligent, smart people within the IT industry. How much money do you think it would cost if I phoned the CEO of a big company up and said, "Hey, I just want to pick your brains over a cup of coffee"? They'd probably go, "No, I don't think so." But if you invite them onto the podcast where they're getting an audience, I also get to ask the questions that I want to ask, and I also get to learn. I want to learn off them. So in answer to your question, that's one of the reasons that I do the podcast. But secondly, yes, by being seen to have conversations with these heavy hitters, by being seen to have conversations with these really smart, intelligent, successful people, it also reflects well on me, because people are listening to the podcast and thinking, oh, Richard's friends with the CEO of that business, or that's a really good question that Richard asked. And so it does reflect very well on you as well. So I think for anybody who's considering doing a podcast, be aware that whilst it might not be your main intention, people will sort of defer to you as the expert in that situation as well. So for all of those reasons, podcasting is very, very successful for me.
That's brilliant. So that's two very, very clear benefits to raising your profile and demonstrating that you're an expert in your field. Have you seen any other benefits to your business, either directly or indirectly, since you started podcasting?
Yeah, absolutely. So it gives you a level of authority. We've already talked about that as well. I think the biggest thing that a podcast has done for me is it's engendered trust in me. People feel as though they know me. So one of the old adages in business that I think is, it was true when I was running the IT business sort of 15 years ago. It's true to this day. All things being equal, people do business with people they know, like, and trust. Running a podcast is one of the best ways to build trust, is one of the best ways to allow other people to get to know who you are as a person. So if you've got a podcast out there, it is a fantastic way to allow people to get to know who you are, what you stand for, the things that you believe in, the causes that you're passionate about, and the people that you associate with as well. Podcasting is a great way for people to get to know you, to like you, and to get trust in you as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. That's a very comprehensive answer. I don't think I've got anything else. So thank you very much for your time. If people wanted to come and listen to your podcast or find out more about you, how can they do that?
Sure. So they can find me. The best place to go to is actually my website, which is www.tublog.co.uk. And they can also find my podcast, which is innovatively called Tubb Talk. You can see a theme growing there between the blog and the podcast. But yeah, and I'm also at Tublog, Tubblog on Twitter. Feel free to get in touch with me.
That's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, Richard.
Cool. Thank you, Gudrun.
Thanks. Bye.